The moon hung heavy in the sky, a blood-red orb that cast an eerie glow over the dense forest. Shadows stretched like dark fingers across the ancient trees, the air thick with the scent of earth and decay. Rook, the werewolf, moved with the fluidity of a predator, his massive frame blending into the darkness. His senses were razor-sharp, every sound and movement amplified as he stalked through the underbrush. He had hunted countless creatures in these woods, animals, humans, and things that even the bravest men would fear to speak of. But tonight, his quarry was something different. The trap had been set. Rook crouched low, his senses heightened waiting. His chest rose and fell with steady breaths, his eyes glowing faintly in the dark as they locked onto the clearing ahead. His trap had been expertly crafted, the deadly snare hidden beneath layers of leaves and dirt. It was the perfect ambush, unseen, silent, deadly. He had tracked this creature for days, its presence unmistakable. And now it was time to claim it. A faint rustle, a delicate movement. Then it happened. The snare tightened, pulling taut as the weight of the creature snapped the trap shut. There was a shriek, a sound both terrified and furious, a sound that sent a jolt of excitement through Rook's veins. His heart thudded, pounding against his ribs, but it wasn't fear, it was anticipation. Rook stood, towering over the scene, his eyes flashing like twin embers. The creature in his trap twisted and fought, but it was no mere animal. It was something far more dangerous. Seraphina. She was like nothing Rook had ever seen. Her skin was pale, almost glowing in the moonlight, her long, flowing hair as dark as the night itself. Her eyes, blood red, like two glowing rubies, fixed on him with a mix of fury and fear. A vampire, trapped in his snare. He should have killed her immediately, but something stopped him. She was beautiful, ethereal even, but deadly. There was an aura around her, an otherworldly power that sent a chill down his spine. Rook stepped forward, his massive, clawed hand reaching down to examine the trap. His breath came out in a low growl, and despite her fear, Seraphina didn't flinch. She locked her gaze onto his, her red eyes narrowing in defiance. "You're not going to eat me," she said, her voice a soft but dangerous whisper, the kind that could cut through the thickest tension. Rook chuckled darkly, his breath hot as it rumbled in his chest. He could hear the pulse of her blood, the rhythmic beat that called to him in ways he had never experienced. His animal side stirred, an irresistible pull, but he would not yield. Not yet. He was in control. Her beauty was intoxicating, and yet she was a threat. Vampires were not meant to be left alive. He knew this, but something inside him, a primal urge, a whisper deep within his soul, told him to delay, to keep her alive for just a little while longer. He crouched beside her, his gaze lingering on her, as if memorizing every detail. He could see the flash of her fangs as she bared them in defiance, her body coiling like a spring ready to snap. "I'm not your prey," she said again, her voice firm, though there was an undercurrent of something Rook couldn't quite place. Fear, or perhaps desire. Rook's lips curled into a predatory grin. "No," he said slowly, "you're not prey." He moved closer, his immense body towering over hers, the weight of his presence suffocating. His scent, wild, raw, and untamed, mingled with the night air. He could feel her pulse now, racing beneath her skin. His nostrils flared, but he held back. The temptation to sink his teeth into her delicate neck was overwhelming. But she was more than just a meal. There was something about her that stirred something deep inside him, something human. The vampire's eyes flickered with something unreadable, but it was gone before he could grasp it. And just like that, the dangerous game had begun. She was no longer his prey. She was something else, something that stirred the wildness in him in a way no other had. As he stood there, towering over her, Rook realized that this encounter had already changed everything. He was drawn to her in a way he couldn't explain. He wasn't sure what was happening, but one thing was clear. This was only the beginning, and somehow, he knew he was no longer in control. Rook watched her closely, his sharp eyes never leaving Seraphina as she struggled against the trap. Her every movement was a dance of fury and grace, a display of strength wrapped in delicate beauty. She was like a trapped predator, every inch of her skin taut with tension, her gaze burning with the cold fire of defiance. He had expected fear, but there was none in her, only anger, only a fierce, deadly resolve. "Let me go," she hissed, her voice barely above a whisper, but it carried a command that almost made Rook hesitate. Almost. He moved toward her, his heavy boots crushing the dry earth beneath him with each step. The closer he came, the more her scent filled his nostrils, sweet, like night-blooming flowers, but underneath it, there was the unmistakable taint of danger. Her blood was something he could almost taste on the air, and the urge to sink his teeth into her throat was overwhelming. But Rook fought it back. He wasn't just some wild beast. He had control, or at least he told himself he did. Seraphina's eyes met his, and for a brief moment, Rook's heart skipped a beat. There was something in her gaze that sent a jolt through his chest, a flicker of something primal, something that mirrored the hunger he felt inside. But it was not fear. It was something more, something dangerous. Her red eyes burned with an intensity that made his muscles tense, his body reacting to her in ways he had never expected. "Please," she said, softer this time, her voice laced with an edge that hinted at something darker, something dangerous. "You have no idea what you're dealing with." Rook growled low in his throat, the sound vibrating through his chest like a storm building inside him. She was a vampire. She was the enemy. He was supposed to hunt her, not feel the pull that made his instincts go haywire. There was a knowing ache inside him, a desire to dominate, to conquer, to claim. And yet, despite the way her presence stirred something wild inside him, Rook hesitated. The chains of the trap dug into her wrists, but her beauty, deadly, ethereal, and impossibly alluring, captivated him. He stepped closer, his shadow stretching over her, towering like an inevitable storm. She didn't flinch, didn't shrink away from him. She met him head-on, as if daring him to break her. Her chin was lifted, and though her body trembled with the effort to free herself, her eyes never wavered from his. Rook's hand reached down, his claws grazing the cold metal of the trap. His fingers brushed against her delicate wrist, sending a shock of heat through his body. He swore he could feel the pulse of her blood under his fingertips, a rhythm that matched the pounding of his own heart. It took all his willpower not to grip her, to yank her close, to feel the heat of her skin against his. Instead, he lifted the trap, releasing her from its grasp. But as he did, his gaze lingered on her, on the curve of her neck, the sharp edge of her features, and the dangerous allure that clung to every inch of her. Seraphina's body shifted, the tension still present in the way she held herself. She could have bolted, could have fled into the night like a shadow, but instead she stood there staring up at him. He could see the fight in her eyes. She wasn't afraid. She was calculating, testing. "You should leave while you still can," she said, her voice a mix of warning and temptation. But Rook was already too far gone. His gaze burned with an intensity that could consume them both, his body no longer his own, responding to the raw magnetism she exuded. His instincts screamed at him to take her, to ravish her with his wildness. But in that moment, there was something else, something deeper, a connection that had nothing to do with hunger. Rook found himself speaking before he could stop himself. "I'm not letting you go." Her lips curled into a slight smile, one that was both alluring and dangerous. It was the smile of a predator who had just found something worth the hunt. And just like that, the game was no longer about survival. It was about possession, and neither of them would walk away unscathed. The cabin was silent, save for the occasional crackling of the fire. Its faint glow flickered against the walls, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch toward the two figures seated across from each other. Rook's eyes never left Seraphina, even as she sat on the farthest corner of the room, her posture regal and unyielding despite the circumstances. The chains that had held her in the trap were now discarded, lying in a heap at her feet. But the air between them was still thick, charged with something neither of them could ignore. Seraphina's ethereal beauty filled the space like a storm, delicate yet dangerous, her pale skin glowing softly in the firelight. She looked like a creature of the night, too perfect to be real, too deadly to be trusted. Her eyes, blood red and unblinking, were fixed on him, and Rook could feel the weight of them, the unspoken challenge in her gaze. She was studying him, just as much as he was studying her. Her lips parted slightly, as if ready to speak, but she remained silent. Rook's pulse was still racing, the echo of their earlier confrontation haunting him. His instincts screamed at him to take control, to remind her who was the true predator here. But there was something else, something that kept him rooted in place. Something about her, about the way she seemed both untouchable and utterly vulnerable at the same time. She was a vampire, an immortal being, but in this moment, Rook saw her not as a threat, but as someone who understood the hunger that gnawed at his soul. "Why don't you just kill me?" she asked suddenly, her voice cutting through the silence. There was no fear in it, no trembling hesitation, just a quiet, sharp curiosity that made Rook pause. He frowned, his jaw tightening. "I could," he replied, his voice rough, the hunger in his chest threatening to claw its way to the surface. "But I don't want to." She tilted her head slightly, as though considering his words. "Why?" Her eyes softened for a fraction of a second before the cold mask returned. "You were ready to tear me apart the moment you found me." Rook leaned back against the stone wall, his muscles tense, his large frame casting a long shadow across the room. "You're not like the others," he said, his voice low, controlled. "You're different." Seraphina's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. "Different?" she echoed, almost mocking. "What do you mean by that?" "Because I'm not a helpless little human, or because I'm a vampire." Rook's gaze flickered to her, the intensity in his eyes unmistakable. "I mean, I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted, the words slipping out before he could hold them back. It was the truth. Her presence was a constant pull, an irresistible force that he couldn't escape. He had fought it, struggled against it, but it was there, tugging at him, making it impossible to think clearly. "You should have been dead the moment I caught you in my trap. But I didn't. And now I can't stop wanting to know why." Her smile faltered, but she didn't look away. "You're right," she whispered, her voice a velvet thread that tangled around his chest. "You should have killed me, but you didn't." She shifted slightly, her gaze never leaving his. "What are you going to do about that?" Rook took a step toward her, his heavy boots thudding against the wooden floor with each movement. He towered over her, his presence overwhelming, but Seraphina didn't flinch. She met him, toe to toe, her eyes unwavering. There was something dangerous in the way she stood, something that made Rook's blood run hot with need. "Don't mistake my hesitation for weakness," he growled, the words thick with warning. "I won't make that mistake again." But even as he said it, he could feel the heat between them, the tension building like a storm on the horizon. She was his captive, yes, but in some twisted way, she was also his equal. She wasn't afraid. Not of him. Not of anything. And that made her even more dangerous. Seraphina's gaze softened again, her voice barely above a whisper. "Then don't." Rook's chest tightened. The urge to claim her, to take control of this wild, unpredictable attraction between them was almost unbearable. But instead of touching her, he stood still, as if he, too, was afraid of the storm they were both caught in. The fire crackled softly, the only sound in the room as they both waited for the inevitable. Neither of them knew what would happen next, but one thing was clear. Their world had shifted, and neither of them would walk away from it unchanged. The moonlight sliced through the cracks in the wooden cabin, casting a silvery glow over the room where Rook and Seraphina stood locked in a silent standoff. The air between them was thick, each breath a struggle against the electric tension that hummed between them. The fire had died down to glowing embers, casting long shadows across the floor that seemed to creep closer, as if drawn to the magnetism of their shared presence. Rook's muscles coiled with barely contained energy, the sharp, animalistic side of him growling in hunger. But it was not hunger for her blood, not entirely. He could feel the primal urge deep within him, calling him to claim her, to possess her in every sense of the word. But there was something else, something deeper, a pull he couldn't explain, a connection he hadn't expected. Seraphina's eyes, still glowing with that dangerous crimson light, never left his. She stood as if she were carved from ice, untouchable and impossibly perfect. Yet beneath that icy exterior, there was a flicker of something that called to him, something that made him yearn to break through her defenses. But how? She was no ordinary prey, no helpless creature he could easily overpower. She was a vampire, immortal, lethal, and far beyond his understanding. Her voice shattered the silence, soft but laced with an edge of something dangerous. "You still don't understand, do you?" she asked, her words cutting through the thick air like a blade. "You think this is about you controlling me, about you holding the power?" Rook's chest tightened at her words, but he didn't respond. She was right, in some twisted way. He did think he had control, that he could make the rules. But now, standing in front of her, he wasn't so sure anymore. The attraction, the obsession, had shifted the power dynamic. The game had changed. Serafina took a step forward, her delicate feet barely making a sound on the wooden floor. She moved like a shadow, effortless and predatory. She was a creature of the night, but she was not afraid of him. "No," she whispered, her voice almost a sigh. "You want to believe you're the predator, but deep down, you know you're just as much prey as I am." Rook's eyes flared with a flash of anger, the wolf inside him stirring. How dare she speak to him like that? He was a force of nature, a creature of untamed power. Yet, despite the fury building in his chest, something in her words rang true. It was a whisper of vulnerability, of truth he didn't want to acknowledge. He had spent his life fighting the beast inside him, hiding the feral side of his nature, pretending that he had control. But with her, it was different. She had come into his world, turned everything upside down, and now nothing felt certain anymore. She stopped just in front of him, so close that he could feel the heat of her skin, even through the air that pulsed with tension. Her scent, sweet yet sharp, filled his nostrils, driving his senses wild. His chest rose and fell with each breath, his pulse hammering in his ears. "You're afraid of me," she said softly, her voice laced with something almost tender. It was a cruel, cutting observation, but it held no malice, only truth. She knew it as well as he did. Rook swallowed hard. He was not afraid of her. He couldn't be, but something about her, something in the way she looked at him, made the wall he had built around himself begin to crack. The slightest smile curved her lips, and for a moment it was as if she saw straight through him, saw all his hidden fears, his desires, his weakness. It was unnerving. "I'm not afraid of you," Rook growled, his voice hoarse, rough with the effort to suppress the overwhelming urge to take her. But Serafina didn't back away. She leaned in just slightly, the heat of her breath brushing against his skin. "No," she whispered, "but you will be." The words hit him like a punch to the gut. His body stiffened, every muscle tensing in response to the challenge in her tone. The desire to dominate her was overpowering, but in that moment, Rook realized something deeper, something more dangerous than mere hunger. He was losing himself in her, and that terrified him more than anything else. For the first time, the werewolf wasn't sure if he would be the one to break her, or if she would break him first. Their eyes locked again, a silent understanding passing between them. The night was far from over, and neither of them would walk away the same. The forest outside the cabin whispered with the sounds of the night, wind rustling through the trees, the distant calls of nocturnal creatures. But inside, there was only silence. A thick, suffocating silence that wrapped itself around Rook and Serafina like a second skin. Neither of them moved, neither of them spoke, the space between them charged with a tension that could ignite at any moment. Rook's breath was heavy, his chest rising and falling as if he were preparing for battle. His eyes, glowing faintly in the darkness, never left Serafina. She stood across from him, her presence almost otherworldly in its grace. The flickering light of the dying fire bathed her in a soft, ethereal glow, making her seem like a vision pulled straight from the depths of his darkest desires. She was stunning, terrifyingly beautiful, yes, but it was more than that. There was something about her that dug under his skin, something that made his wolf stir with a hunger he didn't fully understand. The desire to claim her was fierce, raw, and overwhelming, but so was the need to resist her. He stood tall, every muscle in his body taut with restraint. She was dangerous. He knew that. She was a vampire, a creature of the night, a predator just like him. But there was more to her than the bloodlust he had expected. There was a sharp intelligence in her eyes, a flicker of something that made him question everything he thought he knew about power. Serafina's lips curved into a small, knowing smile, her red eyes gleaming with something that Rook couldn't quite place. She tilted her head slightly, studying him, as if she could see through the walls he had so carefully built around himself. She didn't seem afraid of him, not in the way others would be. She wasn't running from him. In fact, she was almost daring him to break through the walls she had built. "You think you can control this," she said, her voice quiet but biting. "You think you have the power here, but you don't." Rook's jaw clenched, his fists curling by his sides. He wanted to roar, to unleash everything he was keeping in check. She was pushing him, testing him, and he could feel it. But there was something else, something in her tone that made him pause. He was a werewolf. He had fought every instinct, every urge for years. But here, in this moment, with her standing so close, he wasn't sure which part of him was in control anymore. "I am in control," Rook growled, his voice thick with the promise of dominance. His wolf stirred restlessly inside him, responding to her challenge, to the pull that he couldn't ignore. "I've always been in control." Seraphina's smile deepened, and she took a small step forward. The space between them closed, and Rook's heart skipped a beat. There was something in the way she moved, so fluid, so predatory, that made him want to reach out, to pull her to him and feel the heat of her skin. But he didn't. "You think so?" she whispered, the words sliding over him like a caress. "Then why haven't you killed me yet?" The question hung in the air, heavy and loaded. She was right. He should have ended this, should have taken what he needed and moved on. But something inside him kept him there, kept him with her. His wolf was furious with him for hesitating, but there was something human inside of him, something that refused to let her go. Rook took a deep breath, his fingers twitching with the desire to touch her, to feel the heat of her body beneath his hands. His gaze lingered on her lips, the sharpness of her features, the intoxicating scent of her that was so unlike anything he had ever known. She was a vampire, a monster, yet he couldn't bring himself to see her as one. "I don't know," he admitted quietly, his voice raw. "I just don't know." The words seemed to catch her off guard. She froze, her eyes narrowing as if searching for something deeper in his soul. For a moment, there was no challenge, no fight, just two beings, standing in the quiet, grappling with something neither of them could control, something dangerous. Seraphina's gaze softened, and for the briefest moment, Rook thought he saw a flicker of understanding in her eyes. But just as quickly, the mask of cold detachment returned. "Then stop pretending you have control," she said, her voice quiet but firm. Rook's chest tightened, his instincts battling against the fragile thread of restraint he still clung to. He was losing himself in her, and that terrified him. Before he could respond, she turned away, her movements as graceful and deadly as ever. But Rook didn't move. He couldn't. The pull between them had become undeniable, and in that moment, he realized he wasn't the one in control anymore. Rook stood motionless, the weight of Seraphina's words still pressing down on him like a physical force. Her back was to him now, her silhouette outlined by the dying light of the fire. But even as she walked away, her presence filled the space. Every step she took reverberated in the depths of his chest, and every breath he drew seemed to pull her closer. His hands clenched into fists, his claws scraping against his palms as he fought to maintain control. He wanted to be the one in charge. He was the predator, the werewolf. But with each passing second, it became harder to deny the pull she had on him. She was a vampire, a creature of darkness, yet everything about her made his wolf howl with longing. The silence between them stretched, growing unbearable. The night outside had deepened, and the cabin seemed to close in around them, as if it too was holding its breath, waiting for the next move. Rook could feel his heart pounding in his chest, a primal rhythm that matched the intensity of the storm raging inside him. She stopped, her back still turned to him, but her voice was soft, almost too soft. "You can't control me, Rook. You never could." The words sliced through the tension, and Rook's jaw tightened. She was right, and that realization stung like a bitter wind. He could feel it deep in his bones. This dance between them, this attraction, this need, had never been about control. Not really. It had always been something darker, something far beyond his understanding. "I don't need to control you," he growled, his voice rough with the struggle to keep his emotions in check. "I just need to make you understand." He took a step forward, his heavy boots thudding against the floor. His senses were overwhelmed by her scent, by the heat that radiated from her, the danger that clung to her like an intoxicating fog. It would have been so easy to reach out, to grab her, to pull her into the storm he felt swirling inside him. But he didn't, not yet. Serafina's head turned slightly, just enough for her eyes to lock with his, and the intensity of her gaze hit him like a physical blow. There was something in the way she looked at him, something both challenging and inviting, that made his blood run hotter. "You don't get it, do you?" she whispered, her voice low but piercing. "You're just as trapped in this as I am. We're both prisoners of the same darkness." Rook's throat tightened, his wolf snarling inside him at the truth in her words. He wasn't just fighting against her. He was fighting against himself. The beast inside him had longed for her from the moment they met, but now it wasn't just about lust. It was about something deeper, something more dangerous. He moved closer, a slow, deliberate step. His gaze never wavered from hers as he closed the distance between them. The air seemed to shimmer with the heat between them, a tension so thick it was almost suffocating. "I'm not afraid of you," he said, his voice hoarse, raw with the weight of his desire. "I never was, but you." He took another step, his presence looming over her now, the strength of his body radiating in a way that was unmistakably dominant. "You terrify me, and that's why I can't let you go." Serafina's lips curled into a smile, not one of joy, but of something far more dangerous. "Good," she murmured. "Then you understand." For a moment they stood there, neither of them moving, neither of them speaking. It was as if the world outside had ceased to exist, leaving only the two of them in this tangled web of desire, power, and restraint. Rook's hand twitched, his claws just inches from her skin. The urge to touch her, to feel the heat of her body against his, was unbearable, but he held himself back. He had to. He couldn't let her win, not like this. But even as the thought crossed his mind, he knew the truth. The battle had already been lost. They were both drawn into this dangerous game, bound by forces neither of them could control. Serafina was no longer just a vampire, no longer just prey. She was something else, a mirror to his own darkness. And for the first time, Rook wasn't sure if he was the predator or the one being hunted. The night pressed in around them, thick and heavy, as Rook and Serafina stood in the center of the cabin, locked in a silent confrontation. The flames from the hearth flickered weakly, casting long, trembling shadows that danced like restless spirits across the wooden walls. The world outside felt miles away, swallowed whole by the deep, unspoken tension that crackled between them. Rook could feel this pulse pounding in his veins, a rhythm that was both his own and not. It was the rhythm of the wolf inside him, the one that had been clawing at the edges of his mind, urging him to claim her, to dominate her, to bend her to his will. But every time he took a step forward, every time he moved to reach for her, the raw, electric pull between them only intensified, drawing him deeper into the madness he had fought for so long to avoid. Serafina was like a drug, deadly, intoxicating, and utterly irresistible. Her gaze met his with a challenge, her crimson eyes burning with an intensity that mirrored the fire within him. There was no fear in her, no hesitation. She knew what he was capable of, and yet she didn't back away. She was dangerous. She was a vampire. She could kill him in an instant if she wanted to. Yet in this moment she didn't. She stood there, still and poised, as if daring him to make the next move. And Rook was lost. He moved toward her slowly, his every step measured, controlled, even as the wolf howled inside him, demanding to be set free. His breath came faster, and with each inhalation, he could taste her, feel the heat of her skin, the promise of the chaos that would follow if he gave in. Serafina didn't flinch. She stood her ground, her body as still as the night itself, her eyes never leaving his. She was waiting for him. "You think you can break me," she said, her voice low, smooth like silk and sharp like a blade. "But you're wrong. I am not something you can control." Rook's chest tightened. She was right. The desire to conquer her, to dominate her in every way, had always been at the forefront of his mind. But now, in her presence, it felt different. The hunt had become something more, something darker. He wasn't just after her body. He wanted to own her in ways that went far beyond the physical. He wanted to make her part of him, to entwine their fates so deeply that nothing could ever pull them apart. I don't need to break you, Rook growled, his voice thick with desire. You're already broken. You just don't know it yet. Seraphina's lips parted in the faintest smile, one that was neither kind nor cruel, but something in between, something that made Rook's heart stutter in his chest. I know exactly what I am, she whispered, her voice carrying an edge of something ancient, something untouchable. And I know what you are too. The question is, can you handle it? She took a single step toward him, closing the space between them. The air seemed to shimmer as she moved, her presence more powerful than the weight of the moon itself. Every fiber in Rook's being screamed at him to reach for her, to drag her into him and claim what was his. But he held back barely. Her fingers brushed against his chest, the touch so light it could have been a ghost caress, yet it sent a jolt of fire through him, igniting every nerve. Rook froze, every instinct in him roaring to life, but there was something in Seraphina's gaze that held him in place. It wasn't fear. It wasn't submission. It was an invitation. You think you're the predator, she murmured, her voice just above a whisper, but you're so much more like me than you realize. Rook's breath caught in his throat. The realization was like a slap in the face. She was right. They weren't so different after all. The hunter and the hunted had become one, bound by a force neither of them could escape. The truth was, they were both creatures of darkness, both addicted to the blood that flowed through their veins, both consumed by a hunger that was insatiable, but neither of them was ready to admit it, not yet. The wolf inside him howled in frustration, but Rook couldn't pull away. He was too deep now, too entangled in the storm they had created. Seraphina's fingers lingered on his chest for a moment longer before she withdrew, leaving him breathless, desperate, and lost in the abyss between them. Her smile never faltered. This is just the beginning, she said softly, almost as if to herself. Rook's heart slammed against his ribs. He didn't know if he was ready for what came next, but he knew one thing for sure. There was no turning back now. Rook's heart thundered in his chest as the weight of Seraphina's words settled in the air between them. The room felt smaller now, the shadows longer, the space between them impossibly charged with an energy that neither of them could deny. She was a puzzle, a riddle wrapped in darkness, and he found himself lost in the answer he could never quite figure out. The hunger inside him had grown, gnawing at his insides like a relentless beast. Seraphina stood before him, an ethereal vision in the flickering light, her gaze cold but infinitely alluring. She was everything he had ever been taught to fear, and yet she had become something he craved. The line between predator and prey had blurred into nothingness. His wolf clawed at the inside of his chest, desperate to make her his, to seize her, to claim her in ways that both terrified and thrilled him. She tilted her head slightly, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of her lips. It was dangerous, that smile, too full of knowledge, of secrets that she had yet to reveal. She was playing with him, but Rook was beyond the point of being careful. Every move she made pulled him deeper into her web. Each word she spoke a lure he couldn't resist. You think you've won, don't you? Rook growled, his voice strained, thick with the tension building inside him. He wanted to rip the distance between them away, to feel the heat of her skin under his hands. But he was afraid of what would happen if he did. He was afraid of what she would do to him once he gave in. Seraphina's eyes flashed, her lips curling in a way that made his wolf snarl with anticipation. I haven't won anything, Rook, she said, her voice soft but tinged with something that sent a shiver down his spine. I'm just as trapped as you are. Don't you see? We're bound by the same hunger, the same darkness. You can't run from it, and neither can I. The words cut through him like a blade, sharp and precise. He had always been in control, always held the reins of his own fate, until now, until her. His grip on himself was slipping, his resolve breaking under the weight of his need for her. He moved toward her, his body an instinct-driven force, drawn to her like a magnet. She didn't move away. She stood her ground, the soft glow of the fire casting shadows over her features, highlighting the deadly beauty of her every movement. She was a predator too, but she wasn't afraid of him. His fingers brushed against her cheek, and the contact sent an electric jolt through his body, awakening a part of him that he had buried for so long. She leaned into this touch, just slightly, but enough to make his heart stutter. She was toying with him, playing a game he wasn't sure if he could win. "You're right," Rook whispered, his voice raw, barely a growl. "I'm not in control anymore, but neither are you." Seraphina's gaze softened, but it wasn't pity. It was something else, something deeper. "Maybe," she said, her voice barely above a breath. "But that doesn't mean we can't be something together. Something more." Rook's chest tightened. His wolf was restless inside him, clawing, demanding. But this was something else. It was a bond, a thread that wound its way between them, tangled in the desire, the power, the darkness they shared. With a single movement, he closed the gap between them, his lips crashing against hers in a kiss that was raw, desperate in a way he couldn't explain. It wasn't a kiss of love, not yet, but it was a kiss of claim, of power, of dominance, of two creatures finally acknowledging the pull they had both tried so hard to resist. Seraphina responded with equal fervor, her hands gripping the collar of his shirt, pulling him closer, as if she too had been waiting for this moment. Their bodies collided with a force that rattled the walls of the cabin, their breaths mingling, heavy and ragged, as the world around them seemed to vanish. They were both bound by the same dark hunger now, and there would be no turning back.